Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Once again, we find ourselves in the wake of an actor's death. This time around, it was actress Kelly Preston, married to John Travolta, and has been in quite a few movies. We looked up for some movies that she had been in that were horror, and I think we found one. And that horror movie is Christine. So this week we are doing John Carpenter's Christine, written by Stephen King, as a tribute to Kelly Preston. So, Craig, I didn't really know a lot about Kelly Preston coming in, and then as you and I got talking a little bit about her, realized she'd actually been in quite a few movies that I knew and loved. Space Camp from the 80s, Twins. You mentioned she met John Travolta on the set of a film called Back in the USSR. Is that right?
I think that's what it's called. I remember that song featured prominently in the movie. It was a goofy movie about how the KGB was setting up this town in Russia where they were trying to imitate Americans. And basically what they were doing is they were training spies. But the town that they set up was like a 1950s town. And so they brought in John Travolta and some other guy, they didn't know what they were doing, but to modernize the town so that the spies would be better or whatever. It was a really goofy movie, but she was really cute in it. I think I picked Christine because, it must have just been the first horror movie that I saw that she was in. I think that she was also in From Dusk Till Dawn, maybe?
She had some part in it, huh? Was it a big part or a small part?
Well, I don't know. But I picked Christine just seeing that she was in it, and then I watched the movie, which I had seen before, and realized that she has a really tiny role.
Yeah.
She's only on screen for, 5 minutes max, and she plays this beautiful cheerleader who pines over one of our main guys from the movie, and he overlooks her in favor of the lead female in the movie, whose name is Lee, played by Alexandra Paul from Baywatch and lots of other things. But what I kept thinking throughout the movie, they kept going on and on about how Lee was the most gorgeous girl in school, and Kelly Preston plays Roseanne, and I thought she was way prettier. I thought the guy was really stupid. Here he's got this gorgeous blonde cheerleader throwing herself at him, but he's interested in the bookish Lee. But that's okay, whatever. Yeah. She's young and beautiful, and in this movie, and she remained beautiful throughout her life. She struggled apparently with breast cancer for a couple of years, and she kept it very private. I think that her death came as a surprise to everybody except those who knew her closely and personally, and it was sad. I was really sad when I heard it, but I respected her decision to keep her health struggles private and was glad that she was able to do that. I think that she went peacefully, with family around her, and she was far too young to pass. She has young children. That family has suffered tragedy before. They lost their oldest son to an accident. He also struggled with Kawasaki syndrome, and so they've had their fair share of trouble, but I'm sure that she's resting peacefully now. So yeah. I'm glad that we're taking at least a moment to celebrate her, because I had a big crush on her from the movie Space Camp. I loved that movie when I was a kid.
Oh, me too.
And she was super, super cute in that movie. And so, yeah, that's why we picked Christine.
I also, watching this movie, got the feeling that maybe there are some deleted scenes.
There are a bunch.
Maybe her role was probably a little more expanded, because she just gets kind of dropped, right?
Yeah.
There's a pretty big deal in the beginning of the film where we start following this kid named Dennis, who's kind of the nice-looking jockey football player guy, who has a more nerdy friend named Arnie with the huge nerdy glasses. That's how you know he's a nerd, because it's an 80s movie.
Right.
He picks him up from his parents' house, and his parents are kind of giving him Arnie a hard time. They immediately start having this sex talk, just very teenage boy.
Now that we're going to be seniors, I figured it's about time that we got you laid. Like this year, huh? Huh?
I need a girl to get laid.
Well, what about Gail Justin, huh?
Oh, Gail, just in case? No, I don't like her mustache.
You, Arnie. I mean, what do you care if you get a little hair in your mouth, huh? Okay. How about Sally Hayes, huh? She's cute.
She's a sophomore.
So what? She's a walking sperm bank, Arnie. I know. Come on.
Well, I don't think I have the minimum deposit to open an account. You know what I mean?
Are you kidding? You carry your life savings between your legs. Come on, Arnie.
I think maybe I'll just beat off.
When they're in the hallway of the school, he points out and says, hey, have you seen this super, super hot chick? Which is, as you said, Lee walking down the hall. And in the meantime, there are these little bits where Roseanne is trying to flirt with Dennis, kind of flirts with him. He kind of gives her the cold shoulder. He kind of looks over her shoulder. You know, there's a bit in the library where he finally approaches Lee. Roseanne thinks he's going to be approaching her, so she kind of perks up, and then he walks right past her. And I feel like we never see her again after this.
We see her one more time. She's cheerleading at a football game, and still, you know, watching Dennis, you know, fawning over Dennis. And then I think that's it. I think you're right. I don't think we do see her again.
Hi, Dennis.
Oh, hey, Roseanne. How you doing?
I'm okay. They gonna let you play football this year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Doc says I'm as good as new.
Then I guess I'll be seeing you out there.
I hope so.
Well, TTFN.
And so, you know, there's not much to say. You know, I think Kelly Preston was a perfectly fine actress. You know, I never had any negative criticism about her performances. She's just, you know, very beautiful and charming. Somebody that I would have certainly been drawn to as a young man. But you're right, she's just not given a whole lot to do here. She's not really an integral part of the plot, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen more of her.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Alexandra Paul, who plays Lee, is also very beautiful. I don't want to make it sound like I think she's some kind of troll. She's certainly not. She's very beautiful too. Kelly Preston just kind of has more of an all-American look, especially in this movie. She's blonde and thin and perky, and
she's got a bit of that, like, Marty McFly's mom feel to her. Didn't you kind of get
a little
that?
bit.
A little bit, you know?
A little bit.
But you've read the book, right? I assume you have.
I've not. No, this is one of the few Stephen King books that I've never read, which I say that, and then when I try to catalog all the ones I have read, he's written so many. Yeah. There are actually quite a few that I haven't read, and this is one of them. But I'd be interested to, because I read that during this time, and really throughout his career, Stephen King has been so prolific, and he was so in demand that the rights for the movie were sold, and I think the movie was already in production or pre-production before the book was even published. I don't remember who it was. John Carpenter ended up directing it, so I don't remember if it was the screenwriter.
Yeah, Bill Phillips, the screenwriter.
Who wasn't really interested in pursuing a movie about a killer car. They thought that was too silly.
Yep.
But when he read the book, he was like, this is good. and so he decided to do it. And was it him? Was it Bill Phillips? Or was it John Carpenter who, one of them had a choice between either Cujo or this?
Bill Phillips, yeah. He read both books. He thought Cujo was silly, so he decided to do this one instead.
Which is, I have read Cujo, and I think Cujo's an excellent book, and we've talked about it on the podcast. I think it's a great movie, too. This movie, you know, there's so much talent attached to it. Of course, Stephen King's name is huge. John Carpenter is a huge director. It's got not super, super famous people. In fact, they specifically chose with their main actors to go with people who were a little bit less prominent. Some more prominent people auditioned for the roles. Scott Baio, I think, auditioned. Brooke Shields auditioned. And there were a couple of other big names who auditioned. They decided to go with some lesser known people, but there's a bunch of teen boys in the movie. There's our two main ones who you've already mentioned, and then there's basically like a group of bullies. And that group of bullies is like a cornucopia of teen male actors from the 80s.
Yes.
None of them stars, but you will recognize every single one of them from some teen movie or some horror movie of the 80s. So there's lots of familiar faces, there's lots of big talent, and the movie just didn't do very well, critically or financially. And I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out too. I mean, I think I have problems with the movie, but I'm not sure that is why it didn't do so well. It almost feels, as it was going on, I was like, gosh, this is almost just like Carrie again, just
it's
with
a lot
car.
like Carrie.
And it's about this nerdy kid who, with Carrie, she's totally teased and everything, and then she finds she has these powers, and she uses these powers eventually, to get revenge on the people who are pretty relentless and brutal towards her. This is the same kind of deal. This guy gets this car, and the car has this sort of magical quality where it sort of seems to possess him as much as it itself has some sentience. And as the movie goes on, then the car kills people who are bullying him, until the final conclusion that ends in tragedy. So
it is. There are a lot of parallels, and it's an odd premise, like the screenwriter. If I had just heard this premise with like an evil killer car, like that's kind of dumb. But I do think that there is promise here. Even though I haven't read the book, I know that there are some differences between the book and the movie. In the movie, the first scene that we see is the car on the assembly line. Like, it looks like it's done, but it's still on the assembly line. The song Bad to the Bone is playing over this opening scene, and the car injures an inspector and then kills another guy who gets into it and drops some cigar ash on the seat. And it doesn't really show how it killed that guy. His body is just discovered. So the movie suggests that this car is just inherently evil, like off the assembly line.
Yeah.
In the book, it was just a normal car, but then the guy who owned it became so obsessed with it that somehow he developed some kind of like psychic bond or something with it that gave it sentience and allowed it to do things. That's mentioned in the movie, like the previous owner is mentioned, and the things that happened to his family, like the deaths of all his family were somehow tied to the car and his death.
Yeah.
But the book suggests that it was that relationship, that bond between the car and the owner that gave the car its energy. And in the book, when the original owner died, Christine, the car, lost that energy. And that's why when Arnie discovers the car, within the first 10 minutes of the movie, he kind of falls in love with it and starts fixing it up. It's like he reignites that energy. And we see it in various ways. He fixes up the car himself the first time. But then once he's established this bond with it, the car starts to be able to regenerate itself. It starts to be able to do things on its own. Like, he doesn't even have to be able to drive it. We see throughout the course of the movie that the mileage keeps rolling back as though it's gaining energy.
Yeah. That's a cool premise, actually, like that notion.
It is. And I don't think that it's executed poorly. What I found myself thinking was that this would have been better suited for like an hour-long episode of an anthology.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like there was really enough meat to the story for almost 2 hours, because the movie is an hour and 50 minutes long. It felt a little overly drawn out. I think that it could have been paced a little bit better, but of course they're going for a feature film, and so they need a certain length so they can put it in the theater and make money. So I get that.
Yeah. I also felt like it was a bit padded. And, that's why I asked if you read the book, because as we all know, Stephen King's books can be pretty long, but they're usually pretty involved and intricate. Yeah. And so the story that sometimes gets translated to the movie is considerably different, or is missing key elements of the book, usually abbreviated for time. In this case, I felt like there must be huge chunks missing. Like, for example, Kelly Preston's character, I felt like they had set her up to have more at stake or involvement in the movie later, but she never does. And I sort of felt the whole movie was a little chunky this way, where it lost focus, or I should say it just changed focus a lot. usually with the film, there's kind of a focus on one main character's story. Like, we more or less focus the story, the plot, around one main character. In this movie, the way it starts out, you start to feel this is Dennis's story, or at least that everything's being told through his lens. And I guess it kind of is, but there's so much of Dennis in the first, at least, quarter, if not third of the movie. Then when Arnie starts, acting weird, there are huge changes.
Right.
It's like we don't get to see Arnie's transformation. We spend a bunch of time following Dennis, and then the next time we see Arnie, boom, he looks a little strange, and he's kind of got his collar popped out on his shirt. And then weird stuff happens, and Dennis is concerned. And then we're following Dennis for a little while, and then boom, we sort of see Arnie again, and there's something with the car. And then there's a whole sequence kind of in the middle where the car is the focus. The car clearly is the villain of the movie. And then it kind of switches focus over to Arnie a little bit more. And then when it comes toward the end of the movie, it's that classic, the friend is concerned, and so he brings, the girlfriend along, and they try to figure out how they're going to help Arnie, and they're going to kind of save the day. That just sort of feels kind of tacked on at the end,
It is.
There wasn't like this gradual, progressive transition in all of these, I would say, 3 main story threads. It was like we just got bits and pieces of it, and it would jump from thread to thread being the main focus of the movie. So it led to some moments where I just kind of scratched my head thinking, yeah, I guess this is the limitation of a killer car movie. It's just a car. I mean,
right.
It's like the killer doll movies. This thing, climb a ladder, go to the second floor, and you're away from it. And so how sinister can you make a car through a whole 2-hour movie?
Right. I agree with what you're saying, is that the focus is weird because in the beginning, like you said, it seems like it's focused on this relationship between this kind of nerdy guy and this popular guy. And Dennis, the popular guy, is played by John Stockwell. Again, very familiar. He was one of the pilots in Top Gun. He was in a cute sci-fi movie, My Science Project, from the 80s that I really liked. He's still working. He was in Turistas, but he's like the nice jock. And Arnie has been his best friend apparently since they were kids. And so, and you get this establishing scene where they're supposed to meet, even though the other guys in their friend group kind of take little jabs at Arnie, it's all pretty innocent.
Yeah.
But then Arnie gets really bullied by this 40-year-old kid.
Right. So typical,
named,
right?
Buddy.
How many times did he flunk out of high school?
Oh my God. This guy looked like he could have been Arnie's dad. But Buddy, and he's got his gang of goons. And, it's serious bullying where they're taunting him, they're messing with him. Buddy even threatens him with a switchblade. And Dennis intervenes, but he's no match for a whole gang of folks. It eventually gets broken up by a teacher, and the bully vows, for whatever reason, to get Arnie later on, which is kind of stupid. Like, Arnie never did anything to him. You singled this kid out. You picked on him. You got in trouble for picking on him. It's not his fault. But I guess that's bully mentality.
Arnie admitted under pressure from the teacher that broke things up that the bully had a switchblade on him. But yeah, that's it. You're right. It's just, it's a little silly. And it doesn't have that. This is where it is so different and so inferior, I think, to Carrie, is because we spend so much time with Carrie. And she is such a sympathetic character.
Right.
Whereas Arnie is just like this nice, kind of goofy guy, doesn't really do anything wrong. Most people seem to think he's okay and kind of like him, except for this group of bullies who are dicks to him. And his main problem is his parents. Now, Carrie, right? One of her biggest problems was her mom. But,
right.
Arnie's parents come across, as most of Stephen King's parents do in all of his novels, as just overbearing. Yet, they're not Carrie's mom.
No, she was mentally ill. His parents are just kind of assholes, but I don't know. I don't know. I can't say all teenagers, but when I was a teenager, I clashed with my parents for stupid reasons.
Well, they're just kind of strict, you know?
You're right in that Carrie is such a sympathetic character, and Arnie starts out that way. He just seems really meek but nice and funny and unassuming, you know, appreciative of his friendship with this guy. And then they find this car. It's just parked not along the side of the road, but like in somebody's yard, junky yard. And Arnie's immediately drawn to it. He wants to buy it. The guy who sells it to him's name is George. And he's this old, crusty guy. And I'm like, who is that? And so I looked it up, and it's Roberts Blossom. And he's the old, scary guy from across the street on Home Alone.
Yep. Yeah.
Much creepier in this movie than in Home Alone.
He is.
My asshole brother bought her back in September '57. That's when you got your new model year in September. Brand new she was. She had the smell of a brand new car. That's just about the finest smell in the world. Except maybe for pussy. When he got her, she had 6 miles on the odometer. Goddamn Roland went through hell and back with Christine.
Your brother loves this car so much. Why is he selling it?
Because he's stone cold dead, that's why. Died 6 weeks ago.
His daughter choked to death in it, and his wife killed herself in it, and then he ended up killing himself in it. But none of this really, and I don't even remember if all of that information comes out right in the beginning. But
No.
Arnie is just laser focused on buying this car, and he's willing to give whatever the guy asks, and so he ends up buying it for $250. Arnie is so sympathetic. Then he fixes up this car, which takes no time at all.
Yeah.
To restore this car. His parents won't let him have it at home, so he has to take it to this like self-service garage with this crusty old guy who lets him keep it there and lets him use like spare parts from the junkyard so long as he like helps out around the shop and stuff. But it doesn't take him any time to restore this car to mint condition.
Yeah, and where did he get these skills?
Well, he said that he was taking auto shop, but like he had just started taking it that year. Like, I don't think you learn to completely restore a car. Maybe it's the supernatural influence of the car. I don't know.
Could be.
But my point is, the moment the car is done, Arnie changes like that.
He gets confidence and cocky.
Yeah, and like he stops wearing his nerdy glasses and he starts, you know, wearing like hip clothes. But not just that, he also immediately starts getting pretty jerky.
Yeah.
One of the first things that Dennis notices it, you know, at first, and they kind of talk a little bit, and like Arnie's standing up to his parents more, but that's really, really quick. And then the next thing we see is Dennis is playing football, and Arnie pulls up in the car and like, you know, like some cool guy jacket or whatever, and he's got Lee with him. And Arnie knows that Dennis was interested in Lee. And so it just seems kind of out of character that he would pursue this girl that he knows that his best friend was interested in. And right in that scene, like, because I guess Dennis is noticing them, he gets in a terrible football accident and is sidelined in the hospital for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So that focus is completely shifted back to Arnie in the car, and by this point, Arnie's not so sympathetic anymore.
Yes. Well, he's kind of like the villain of the movie, and that becomes a little problematic, right? Because who do you root for? It's not like this sort of... there's a sense of possession, right? I mean, there's this sense, like when because he's so changed, and because he's so attached to the car, and also his clothes and his hairstyle and everything become distinctly like 50s-ish.
Yeah.
And so I think that's supposed to be a subtle nod to this, you know, symbiosis that he has with this 1957 Plymouth Fury. By the way, Stephen King chose this car because he deliberately wanted a car that didn't already have, you know, like a legend sort of attached to it. But it's cool that it's called the Fury. I guess that's appropriate.
Yeah. It's a really cool car, too.
Yeah, it is. And it looks sinister when it's up and around. I think they did a really good job with the characterization of the car. But here's the problem, like you said. So now he's not sympathetic anymore. Plus he has a killer car. Then they're going after the bullies. That's what happens next, is that those bullies one by one, get picked off by the car. And I'm pretty sure, although I don't know for certain, I think it's a little ambiguous. It's not like Arnie is driving the car. It's that the car is sentient and the car is going after these bullies one at a time.
The supernatural elements of the car are kind of established before that. Like at one point when Dennis is concerned, before he gets injured, I think, when he's concerned about Arnie, he goes to look at the car and he notices that it's like in perfect condition, and he notices that the mileage has gone down. But when he tries to get into the car, the radio turns on and it's, I think, it's either Chuck Berry or Little Richard, I don't remember, but Keep on Knocking But You Can't Come In. Which, by the way, I think my favorite thing about the movie is the music. They make great use of the music in this movie.
It's the way Christine talks, right? It's through the radio of this car. Yeah.
Right. And so there's that, and that kind of spooks him. And then he has a date with, Arnie has a date with Lee at the drive-in. And this kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere, too. Like, she's kind of standoffish, like they're making out. I thought it was such a funny make-out scene because, like, Carpenter made a point of showing, oh, look, he's trying to touch her boobs, and then made a point of showing, oh, look, she's rubbing his crotch.
Like close-up, zoom in.
Yeah, right? But then she pulls away, and she runs out of the car, and he chases after her. And she talks about how she's jealous of the car.
Yeah.
Which is just weird.
It's out of nowhere. Yeah.
It is out of nowhere. And he's like, well, that's weird. I thought girls were supposed to be jealous of other girls. And she goes, well, who do you spend more time with? I guess meaning that he spends more time with his car. Okay, whatever. So
we have to take her word at it because we don't know, because we really haven't seen what's been going on.
He gets her back in the car, and then it's raining at the drive-in, and the windshield wiper stops or like falls off or something. So he gets out to deal with that, and we see his door lock on its own, and Lee takes a bite of a sandwich, and all of a sudden the radio comes on. I don't remember what song it is. It's some sort of pointed song, and the interior glows really bright, and she starts choking. Like, the car can make people choke on food?
Yeah. It's really bizarre, right? Yeah, that part I didn't get. And he's unable to get in, she's unable to get out, and somehow a guy who's walking by, does she open the door or he breaks a window? I don't know, something happens.
She gets it unlocked on her side. Arnie's on the driver's side trying to get in, but it's locked. She gets her side unlocked, and somebody else gets her out and gives her the Heimlich maneuver, and she's okay, but she's all shaken up by it, and that kind of, it's not the like straw that breaks the camel's back, but their relationship is really strained after that.
Yeah.
I guess he apologizes to her, and that leads up to what you were talking about. The next day, they're together, and he says, look, I just have to stop by the garage to get my wallet out of Christine. Like, it seems like, they're not going to take the car because she's weird about it or whatever. But when he goes in, he finds that Buddy and his gang have completely destroyed the car. And we got to see that happen.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I'm sure they had a lot of fun actually smashing that car up.
Probably.
They went through, I read that at least 15% of the budget of this movie was on cars alone. They went through like 15 or 20 different cars.
It was more, like 28, I think.
Not all Furies. Some of them were, cars that kind of looked like it, and some of them were plastic and things like that. But yeah, I even car enthusiasts were actually a little pissed when they saw the movie, to think that so many cars of these classic cars had to go through the ringer for it.
Right.
But on the other hand, it highlighted this Fury, which before, nobody knew about. So what are you going to do? It's like one or the other. And yeah, and so because Christine got beat and smashed up, he is furious and he's pissed.
And he lashes out at her.
Yeah.
Like, not violently, but nearly, very aggressively.
Like it's her fault or something. Oh, you wanted to see this. It's all a little contrived, I think, or at least it's kind of pushed on us. Like if there was something that kind of built up to this, if there's some earlier encounters that they had, or, something we could kind of know about this, more detail about the strain of their relationship, maybe this all would have kind of come off. But it's just like, Arnie's going a little crazy.
Well, I think that what what's meant to be implied is that it's the influence of the car that's making him be this way. But it's like it's a symbiotic relationship. Like they feed off of one another, Arnie and the car. And it's having a negative influence on him. Because in moments, he still tries to be sweet and nice to her, but he's just on edge all the time. And especially now. But that's when, after he chases her off, he kind of starts talking to the car, and he says, it's going to be okay. We'll fix you. And we hear like some crumpling metal. And when he stands back, he sees that the engine has repaired itself. And so he takes a pause, and then he just says, okay, show me.
Oh,
as though he kind of knows.
Yeah.
It's so weird. But it's an amazing scene then when the car reconstructs itself.
It's fantastic. The special effects here are just great. He stands back in the spotlight, and we get these close-up images of the car and the panels that were crumpled, uncrumpling and snapping back to nothing. Of course, this is all done in reverse. But it's so convincing that it's great. I mean, it's a delicious scene to watch, and the sound design here is amazing. Actually, I think the sound design in the whole movie is quite good. Both the sound and the, when you've got a car movie, you've got to have good sound design, right? But yeah, that and the music is both pretty good, and John Carpenter did the music as well. I've always enjoyed John Carpenter's scores, even though you can kind of tell them from a mile away. It's not orchestral, John Williams type stuff, but he can really bang on a synthesizer. Actually, the music reminded me, now that I went off on that tangent, the music reminded me a little bit of Halloween. I mean, it almost felt like a modification of the Halloween score.
Yeah, all of the neighborhood scenes, like like Arnie's parents' house, the neighborhood they live in, that was all filmed in the same neighborhood that Halloween was filmed in too, and so that it's very reminiscent in look of Halloween too.
So here we are.
That marks the point, right? Exactly. So here we are. I mean, that sets up kind of I don't know, I guess what you would call the scary part of the movie.
Yeah. Which is just, like I said earlier, watching the car go after these people. So it goes after the big bully first, Buddy or whatever. No, it goes after one of the other kids first. Yeah, one of the other kids.
The guy that the fat one. The fat one. I don't know the actor's name, but I recognized him. He played the gross older brother in The Curse, which is a movie we should do sometime. But apparently, this is the kid who took a dump on the dashboard of the car when they destroyed it. And so he's the first one to get it. Now, Carpenter made the decision to black out all of these scenes. These death scenes happen at night. And Carpenter made the decision to black out the windows so that you couldn't tell whether Arnie was driving the car or not. And I was a little bit unclear, especially in this first one, whether or not Arnie was driving the car.
Right.
Later on, we know that when the other bullies get killed, he wasn't. We know that for sure. Yeah. But in this first one, I don't know. And so I don't really know if we can even really implicate Arnie in these murders.
No, I don't think we can.
There's a possibility that he had nothing to do with it. Now, he's not upset about it. In fact, he thinks that they got what was coming to them. But I don't know that he actually perpetrated it. I think it was just the car.
Well, there's nothing, right? There's absolutely nothing about this. We don't really get Arnie's reaction to the murders. We don't get any of Arnie talking to Christine saying, oh, I can't believe what you did, or I'm glad about what you did, or anything like that. I mean, there's nothing. It's just, end scene with Arnie, start scene at night with one of these bullies, and the car is going after them. And then the next scene is daytime again, and then Henry Dean Stanton's character gets thrown in here all of a sudden as a detective. And he feels just thrown in here as well. He's only got like a couple small scenes, and it feels like almost the obligatory detective who pops in, who's supposed to put some additional pressure on the antagonist or whatever of the story. But it's a little weird. The questions he's asking him, I think he comes in after is it the second murder when the kid
just the first one.
The kid backs himself into like a dead end, and there are these
like
walls.
a loading dock or something.
Yeah, and there are these narrow walls. And actually, I really liked this scene because it just showed how relentless this car is. Because it's got him backed in there. However, the car is a little too wide to fit through, but it doesn't care. Like, the car just burns rubber and slowly crumples itself into this narrow space to pin this guy against the wall and, I guess, sever him in half. Now, we don't see that happen. And that's another odd thing about this movie, is that is there any gore in this movie at all?
Not really. I mean, we only see the aftermath of one death. Like I have a feeling that you're absolutely right. I think that this whole detective subplot must have been severely truncated from the novel. It just kind of serves to antagonize Arnie more.
But it's not a real threat.
Not really. I mean, because the car is supernatural, like, what is he going to discover? I don't know. I mean, he tries to press him on it, but the detective doesn't really have a leg to stand on. Right after that, there's just a real quick scene where Arnie calls Lee and is nice to her for like 1 second and then just totally blows up on her when she kind of brushes him off and calls her a bitch and is really horrible. And then we get another scene of Christine going after the other bullies. And she chases Buddy and one of his friends in Buddy's car. And they end up at a gas station where the bullies get out and Christine smashes the car. And one of their other bully friends works in this service station. The only one left outside the service station is Buddy. The other two end up inside. And Christine just drives into the gas station and blows it up.
Yeah.
Like,
takes a whiz.
Pretty much.
Takes a whiz of gas on the floor of the gas station and then runs out and blows it up. Yeah, the whole place explodes. It's a really cool scene. I mean, it's going to be tricky. And this is kind of what I said earlier. Like, it's a killer car. It's got to stay on the ground. It's got 4 wheels. It has limitations. All you got to do is climb a ladder or something, get away from it somehow, or behind like a brick wall. But this car is pretty relentless in what it's willing to smash through. And because we've already seen that it's able to regenerate itself, we as an audience understand that it doesn't matter how smashed up this car gets, it's going to be able to go.
Yeah, right.
Puncturing the tires aren't going to do anything. The front end gets smashed up, doesn't matter. So it's pretty brutal, in how it goes after them into there, I think.
This part of the movie, I really felt like was Jaws with a car. That's what it felt like to me. The car felt like the shark from Jaws, and it was just relentlessly after these people. But and the big explosion, like the whole service station explodes, and it's a huge explosion, and it looks great. But you get the suggestion that Christine kind of crushes one of the bullies in the gas station, and then the gas station explodes. So you know that both of the ones in there were killed, but you don't really see it.
Yeah.
And then another amazing part, Christine comes rolling out of this inferno and she's totally engulfed in flames. And
it's so cool.
It is so cool to see this car totally engulfed in flames driving down the road. And it chases Buddy down the road. And again, get off the street, you dumbass. But it eventually just catches up with him and runs him over, and you see his body in flames rolling down the street. That is the only carnage, really, that we see in the movie. Mm-hmm. And it's not gory. There's no blood.
No.
I mean, it's disturbing to see a person on fire, but, in fact, this movie didn't have enough violence to get an R rating. And the only other option at the time, because PG-13 wasn't an option yet, was PG. So Carpenter intentionally inserted a whole bunch of fucks into the movie so that it would get the R rating, because they thought if it was PG, nobody would see it. And they were probably right. Well, then later they were criticized for the language of the movie. So, but even though the movie wasn't super financially successful, had it been rated PG, I mean, I think that would have been the last nail in the coffin.
Nobody wants to see a PG-rated horror movie, not if they're
not usually,
not from
right.
Stephen King,
Right.
Yeah, that was really cool, and it was like the car from hell, just completely in flames. And again, in this era when we know there was no CGI, just to see all of this great practical stuff happening, and these stunts that were being done, and it's really. That was the nice part of the movie for me. I just really got behind this demon car that could regenerate itself, and we got to see all that. We don't need to see the gore, but I could see this car in flames going down the street. Not bad. Pretty good visuals. John Carpenter's no slouch. Yeah.
No, he's certainly not. And that was really fun to watch, but then it's kind of like you said before, then the movie takes a turn. Like, that chapter of the movie is over. The bullies are all dead.
Yeah, Christine has nobody left to kill.
Right.
There's no enemy anymore.
So now what? And so now things get weird. Okay, and I have to say that Dennis seems like a really, really nice guy, but he kind of moves in on Arnie's girl, which I thought was kind of a dick move. Now, it's not entirely him. Like, she kind of calls him because she's worried about Arnie. And it seemed really out of character. Like, they're just hanging out talking about how worried about Arnie they are, but she's awfully friendly with him,
Yeah.
very touchy, and like has her arm around him and like stroking his arm and like laying her head on his chest. And like, come on, you guys. But then it becomes about them. And she's like, I'm pretty sure it's the car. And he's like, no, that can't be. And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure. He's like, okay.
Yep.
So they decide. I guess the deciding factor comes. Dennis says, well, look, we hang out it's New Year's. We hang out, the two of us, at his folks every New Year's. I'll talk to him about it. And Arnie picks him up. And then this scene I really like, and in fact I hope that you play some of the dialogue here.
Oh, I will.
Because I think it's really interesting. But again, it's not like it feels like a different movie.
Well,
it kind of does.
It does.
You know what I
like,
mean?
Well, here's the problem. This is why it feels like a different movie. They're in the killer car. Here we've established that this car is a killer, and Dennis apparently is willing to get on board with this concept and is worried about Arnie. So what does he do? He hops in the same car, and they go on this road trip, and now the car is just a car. I mean, Arnie's being weird, and Arnie's being douchey and stuff.
Weird.
But...
Well,
yeah,
it's beyond douchey. Like, at this point, this was when I felt like we were... And even visually, you're starting to see it. Like, he's getting dark around the eyes and
sweaty and angry.
Yeah. And the things that he's saying are really, really dark. They're drinking in the car, which would be a big no-no in today's films, but this was the 70s, I think people did that. Yeah. According to my dad, anyway, they did. So he's chugging beers and throwing them out the window. He's going like 90 plus miles per hour.
A toast. Death to the shitters of the world in 1979.
Come on, Arnie, I can't drink to that. What can you drink to? What about to us? The friendship? Oh, friendship. Right, that's good. That's real good.
What I liked the most about the scene was getting to see, just how far Arnie has been pushed, but also to see how Dennis reacts to it. Like, he gets really upset.
Yeah.
He's scared, clearly, but he's all but in tears talking to his friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's beyond being scared in the moment and more about, like, my God, what has happened to you? These guys have been friends presumably since they were little.
Yeah.
And I really liked that scene. It had an impact on me.
Yeah, it was a good scene. I was still getting back into the groove of, okay, well, now Dennis is back in the picture. I still was coming off of the whole bit of Christine running around killing things, and I just felt like it was strange that Christine was taking a break now. I don't know. What are you going to do? But, I mean, if I were Dennis and I thought that Christine was this killer car, I would have invited him out for pizza somewhere. I wouldn't have gone down the road with him drunk inside this car. And I was kind of hoping thinking something might happen. I thought maybe the car would kind of turn on Dennis a little bit, or something weird, kind of between Christine and Arnie, especially because Arnie goes on this big thing about, let me tell you about love.
Let me tell you a little something about love, Dennis. It has a voracious appetite. It eats everything. Friendship, family. It kills me how much it eats. But I'll tell you something else. You feed it right, and it can be a beautiful thing, and that's what we have. When someone believes in you, man, you can do anything, any fucking thing in the entire universe. And when you believe right back in that someone, then watch out, world, because nobody can stop you. Then nobody, ever.
I felt like he's describing this connection that he has with this car that he's driving and he's holding and all that stuff, but nothing else is really coming across visually,
Yeah, visually yeah. And I get what you're saying, but kind of the way that I interpreted it is that as long as Arnie's happy, Christine is happy. She wasn't just going out murdering people at random. It was vengeance.
Right.
And so she doesn't really have any reason to do anything now. Now,
that's a good point.
I think had things transpired differently and Dennis had continued to try to get Arnie away from the car, then I think that would have been a problem. And it is.
Good point.
Because that's what they decide. Lee, after all this, Lee and Dennis come up with this plan. Dennis carves into the hood of the car the name of the garage, and it's like the name of the garage tonight or something like that. And Lee's like, "Are you sure he'll come?" And he's like, "Yeah, he'll come, or Christine will come." Their plan is to ambush the car in this garage.
Yeah.
Dennis hotwires a bulldozer, and they're going to ambush the car. Well, Christine's one step ahead of them. And at this time, Arnie is behind the wheel. So I think that at this point, we're supposed to kind of get that the unholy union is complete. It's not just Christine doing things on her own, whether it's her influence or whether it's just the culmination of their relationship. He's aware of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And in this moment, he's prepared to kill his best friend and the girl that he had professed love for throughout the rest of the movie. And I think that's kind of the turning point, the point of no return for Arnie, which is sad because I wanted Arnie to be okay.
Yeah.
And we can talk about, that scene.
Yeah, he comes crashing in. I was a little unclear of what exactly their plan was. He was in the bulldozer, but she's on the ground. And maybe they just didn't get quite set up before Arnie and Christine came in.
Christine and Arnie were laying in wait.
Oh, they were in there already, yeah.
The car was covered up with some junk or something.
Oh, that's right. And they came out from under the junk, yeah. And I had the impression they burst through the wall, but you're right. It was just coming out from under some junk against the wall. Yeah, so they come out and they start attacking him, and immediately he's going after her, the girl. She's able, there's a lot of driving around in this small space, but she's able to kind of maneuver herself against a wall, and Dennis is able to maneuver the bulldozer to protect her.
But just before that, it's rough because Arnie in the car goes after Lee. She's in the office or whatever, and the car crashes into the office, but Arnie is ejected through the windshield and
at this point
stabbed. Yes. At this point, yes.
In the very
pretty
beginning?
Sure.
Oh, I thought it was about halfway through. Yeah, you're right. She ends up in the office at some point. Yeah, and he crashes through the car crashes into the office. And Arnie gets ejected through the window, and he's laying there, and you see, as the picture kind of pans around, that he has a huge piece of windshield glass jutting up through his back and out his front.
In his dying moments, he reaches out and caresses the grill of the car. And then he dies, and that was such a bummer, because, I thought they'll destroy this car, and the spell will be broken, and he'll be okay, and he'll be sorry, and I really kind of wish it had gone that way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. He dies. And then the car continues to pursue them, and like you said, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of business where Dennis like protects her with the bulldozer. I don't remember. I think it's right after it crashes into the office. There's a period of time where the front end is really messed up.
Yeah, looks like teeth.
Yeah, it looks like teeth. And I thought that looked so cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, without giving the car a hugely, like, well, it's got these supernatural qualities, but without being too overdone with it, just the way that it was smashed up, the way that the front end ends up looking at times, it looks angry.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, like you said, it's got these teeth, it kind of runs around, but then it sort of regenerates itself and it goes after her, and she is pretty immobile there. Dennis is able to get behind the car as it's going after her and smash the bulldozer down on top of it. So it kind of stabs the car with the bulldozer as it's inching towards her. And the thing about this bit I thought was really good, like, again, the relentlessness of this car.
Mm-hmm.
The utter relentlessness of this car. Like, we know it can regenerate. This huge bulldozer's in it. It starts to go on top of the car. And it's not an easy go. I mean, it's going over the top of the car, and then it slips back and kind of falls off and then goes over it again. The whole time, Christine is moving forward slowly and slowly and slowly, like, you know, like a dying person crawling towards someone, you know, reaching out.
Yeah.
It's so intense, and the sound and the noise and the crunching and the grinding of the metal and this heavy thing on top of it. And finally, it just utterly gets completely through it, smashes the whole car through and through, kind of squeezes the front out its mouth, and Christine kind of is done. I guess it's just a little too smashed for this, and the next...
I loved it. I loved it when the bulldozer was rolling over it, and it was smashing it and smashing it, but the car just kept regenerating.
Yeah.
And the car radio was playing "Rock and Roll Will Never Die,"
Yeah.
and I just like, you can't kill me.
Yeah. It's so funny.
But they do. They finally get it crushed, and like the headlights go out and the radio stops playing, so it's like it's dead. And the next scene we see is in a junkyard where they've had the car compacted. It's a silly scene because the two survivors are standing there with the detective. Like, did they tell the detective the truth and he believed them?
It's so weird. And as they're staring at it, they hear radio come on with some music, and they're like, huh! And it turns out to be a guy working in the junkyard walking by with the boombox behind him.
Yeah.
It's a little fake out.
That was funny.
But then the camera, you know, slowly kind of dollies in on the little square that is Christine now, and a little bit of its part sticking out there quivers for a second, and then we get credits. So, yeah, I found the movie to get a little tedious. I think that third turn of events, you know, I was pretty ready for the movie to be done because I got what was going on. Okay, Arnie's freaking out. Guys, just like take care of whatever you need to take care of, and let's finish the film. I was a little disappointed that I'm not a gore hound. I was a little disappointed it wasn't, with so many great special effects and cool things in this movie, that it wasn't a little more R-rated, but that's fine. And I thought the music was great. I thought the sound design was great. The story was just okay. It's probably not one I'm going to go back and see again, I think, just for all the reasons we've outlined here, that it just does kind of loses its focus. And for me, you know, became a little tedious to watch. And it was really hard, like you said, to get behind kind of a premise. Like, here's the central character who's being beaten down, so we're rooting for them and they finally get their revenge. It's not really how this turns out, right?
Right.
So it's like, oh, here's this central character, he's beaten down, but then he becomes evil, and then he's not sympathetic anymore, and then they come in and they kind of get the car, but then they also get him, so nobody's a winner.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just, I don't know. Maybe that's why it didn't do so well. I don't know.
I thought it was okay. John Carpenter's a really good filmmaker, but I would say that of his movies, this would fall really low on the list for me.
Yeah.
It's not poorly made. It's well shot.
Yeah.
The acting is fine. It's not spectacular, but it's fine. Like you said, great effects and stuff. I just wonder how it all came together, because the special edition DVD has 20 deleted, extended, or alternate scenes, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so it just makes me wonder if somewhere in the editing or something, it just didn't quite come together the way that maybe it could have. I don't know. Maybe they did the best with the material that they could, because it is an odd premise. But in the end, I think it's okay. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Didn't feel like it was a waste of my time to watch it, just because it is a Stephen King adaptation and because it's John Carpenter. I was bound to watch it, and it was fine. Not one of my favorites, but it was all right. And I wouldn't steer anybody, good pun. I wouldn't steer anybody away from it. I just don't necessarily know that I would give it a strong recommendation. But, that's it. And again, the lovely Kelly Preston, her brief appearance in this, it's really not much. We're kind of grasping at straws here, but she is somebody who I always liked, and she seemed like a cool lady. She seemed like a fun lady. Before she got married, she was kind of a wild girl, and she was with Charlie Sheen for several years, and it's kind of an urban legend in Hollywood. Somehow, while she was living with Charlie Sheen and they were together alone in the house, she got shot. I don't know what the full story is there.
Probably by Charlie Sheen.
Probably. So she had her share of wild days, but then she settled down and became a mother. And I am very, very skeptical of Scientology, but she and John Travolta were dedicated to their faith, and if that's their thing, good for them. She seemed to be happy. She seemed to be, in the later stages of her life, to be happy to be a mother and to kind of be out of the spotlight a little bit. And she'll be missed. She seemed like a cool lady. So we wanted to say something nice about her. This gave us the opportunity, so it was worth it for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. You can find us online. Just Google Two Guys and a Chainsaw. Go to our website, twoguys.red40net.com, where you can find a huge back catalog of episodes. You can leave us a comment there or on our Facebook page, or send us a tweet and let us know what you thought of this episode, and or request something new for us. We're going to be plowing through quite a few requests after this one. So until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.